Now, if you were wondering about the distinct lack of political debates on this programme so far in the campaign, the reason was very simple: fairness. With over 60 candidates in 4 constituencies, we needed to consult with the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland on how fairness could best be achieved. And now that we have reached an understanding, we can proceed in earnest. So we will begin today with the issue that has dominated this campaign more than any other. That is the economy. Over the course of this discussion, we'll try to establish the position of various parties on taxation and cuts, their position on banking debt versus sovereign debt, how we should relate to our neighbours in Europe, and crucially, for thousands of people listening to this show who are out of work, how do the parties intend to create jobs? Our panel today is comprised of candidates from both the Laois Offaly and Longford Westmeath constituencies. Fianna Fáil councillor Robert Troy, Fine Gael councillor Peter Burke, Sinn Féin councillor Brian Stanley and Labour Party candidate John Whelan. Each participant will have 90 seconds to outline the key economic priorities for their party. And once this is complete, we will begin an open discussion, and you're welcome to submit questions by calling 0818 300 103 or texting 083 30 10 103. Brian Stanley, how will Sinn Féin fix the economy?
Good morning, Will. We have a number of proposals to fix the economy, and there's 3 fundamental parts to it. The first one is the need to separate the state debt from the gamblers' debt, the state debt from the debts of bondholders and dodgy bankers. The risk that we run if we don't do that, we run the risk of having a sovereign default. We must deal with the state debt, which is our responsibility. There's a gap of 18.7 billion in that at the moment. We propose closing that gap over 6 years. Starting this year, we have 4.6 billion reduction in the full year. Obviously, part of the year is gone now, so you're looking at more like 3 to 3.5 billion. At present, there's over 15 billion in exchequer funding, according to the central bank as of a week ago. So obviously, there's 15 billion in exchequer funding. Our revenue raising measures and savings would bring in the order of 3.5 to 4 billion. The banks are the second key part of it. We need to have a banks resolution bill. And the main points of our bank resolution bill would be to burn the bondholders in Anglo and Irish nationwide. We propose to have, with the other banks, to have a debt for equity swap. And Bank of Ireland, which we're already bankrolling and bailing out, we would turn that into a state investment bank. And the third main plank of our economic recovery would be to have a job stimulus. And what we're proposing there is that we would have 2 billion per year invested in a job stimulus package over a 3.5-year period. Okay. And according to economists like Philip Lane, that brings a 16.5 billion return to the exchequer over a 6-year period.
It'll be 100 seconds for everybody then. Fine Gael position, Peter Burke.
Fine Gael is the only party that can provide a stable government and a change of government. We are the only party that has a credible economic plan to stimulate our economy and get jobs back into our country. Our plan, New Era, is aimed at putting 100,000 jobs into our economy in the next 5 years. It's going to be financed by public and private pension funds and the sale of non-strategic state assets. How do we propose to do this? We want to invest heavily in infrastructure, such as broadband. We want to get broadband delivery to every home and business in our state. Take, for example, the whole North Westmeath area. The broadband rollout is very poor in the area, and you cannot attract business if you haven't the basic infrastructure there for them. We're going to invest heavily in water. Currently, 34 local authorities look after our water delivery. In essence, $500 million is wasted on water before it gets to our taps. We want to reform our water services, thereby attracting industry into our economy. We want to reform our telecommunications and our renewables. This is an essential part of getting our economy back to work and getting jobs into our country. If the basic supporting infrastructure isn't there for business, it therefore can't come into our country. And Fine Gael's plan, the heart of it is jobs. And we want to get solid infrastructure and sustainable infrastructure into our economy. And I have insights on how to do this, being a qualified chartered accountant and a graduate of NUI Galway. And I want to bring my insights into the table to change Longford Westmeath and reform our political system.
OK. John Whelan, the Labour Party position.
Well, it's very important, Will, that you started off your key debates on the jobs issue, because it is the burning issue and it's the pressing matter on the doorsteps everywhere we go. I know firsthand what it's like to lose my job, and I can relate to what people are saying to me when they meet me on the door. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? And that's why Labour and Eamon Gilmore and we have prioritised job creation, not just in some intangible or airy-fairy way, but real jobs, and real jobs now. People are tired of hearing the terrible sickening phrase, going forward into the future. We've got to create jobs in the green renewable sector. We've identified investment in that area will bring about 75,000 new jobs. Tourism, great opportunities, great scope there. We're driving a plan for a new 4 million cycling and leisure track across the Steve Blooms. We've met with Bord Damona's Strategic Development Manager to discuss the development of a new reservoir, the first reservoir built and developed in the country for 40 years across the Laois border in Garryhinch. Will create loads of construction jobs. It makes sense in terms of the delivery of water, a badly needed resource across the eastern seaboard and the capital, but also will double up as a massive tourist and leisure amenity. The agri-sector, we need to keep young farmers in farming and bring more back into it. We're forming strategic alliances with Bord Bia to develop Irish food brands. We believe construction has a way forward. We need to build the new schools that this country needs now and to get children out of 40-year-old prefabs and stop wasting money on renting prefabs, and therefore it has a win-win situation. Also, we need to help small businesses, and the Labour plan for a strategic investment bank will create cash flow and stimulate jobs in the small business sector.
Time up. Finally, Fianna Fáil Councillor Robert Troy, your party's position.
Well, I think jobs are our number one priority. No one wants to see people out of work, or no one wants to see parents saying goodbye to their children at an airport. I think the best way to get people back to work is to get our own house in order by stabilising our public finances and improving our competitiveness. We are making good progress in this regard, as our figures last year showed exports at an all-time high. But for Longford Westmeath, the key three areas where I see jobs growth is agriculture. Our food and agriculture sector is world-renowned. We need to build on this with continued investment. And as a party, we have shown our commitment by maintaining payment levels for all the main agricultural schemes. In Westmeath in 2009, 34 million was received by farmers under the single payment scheme, 5 million under disadvantaged dairy aid, 5.5 million under the farm waste management, and over 600,000 on the suckler welfare scheme. I also see potential in tourism. We need to concentrate on increasing the number of tourists. We are working on this by maintaining our advertising budget of 44 million, so we can increase our tourists both nationally and internationally. We have reduced the travel tax, and we have very competitive hotels and top quality hotels that we can attract foreign visitors to. We also need to help the unemployed, and we already have supports in FOSS and community employment schemes, but we have additional supports with the 5,000 in the TOOS programme, 5,000 in the internship programme.
Okay, I think everybody has gone slightly over their time, but that's reasonably fair on the uncontested part. So let's get down to business then and have an open debate. All parties differ on how to make the correction to the exchequer deficit. Whether to apply more tax, spend less money on public services, inject a stimulus, whatever the case may be. Now, for you listening to this programme, the choices will manifest in your pay packet, the price you pay for goods and services, the number of Gardaí on patrol in your area, and so on. So let's start with Fine Gael. Peter Burke, your party purports to be the low-tax choice, but at what price to the services we enjoy?
First of all, well, there's a number of areas which we can save money. I think our policy in Fine Gael has always been a low-tax party. We're a party rewarding enterprise. I think that's the most important thing that any party can do. We need to encourage our entrepreneurs and encourage employment. Our party believes that a 78% cut and 28% tax policy is the best policy to get Ireland back working.
Can you run those numbers again? They don't add up to 100.
Sorry, 2 to 1 our tax and cut policy. But what we're saying is clearly
2 to 1.
Yeah. But
your party leader and your finance spokesperson say 78-22, and
sorry,
occasionally they change to 73-27. So which is it?
My apologies, 78-22. But our policy is very clear. We want to reform our politics. We're looking to abolish the Shannon, reduce the size of the Dáil, and slim down government, as those key areas will give us room to manoeuvre and encourage jobs into our economy. In terms of our infrastructure...
But let's look at the big areas of savings, because if you're going to apportion 72% of this adjustment to savings, it's going to be a substantial amount. So in key areas, where are you focusing?
Well, we're looking to slim down our public service. We're looking...
What you intend to do is slash 30,000
okay.
public sector...
John, we'll get to you in a moment.
Okay, sorry.
We're looking to slim down our public service. First of all, we're talking about not frontline staff, and we made this clear. We're talking about people in administration that are on the high end of the HSE. We will be looking for voluntary redundancies in the scale of 30,000 over a 5-year period.
What if you don't get them?
Well, it'll be through natural wastage. We expect to get them, and our policy has been fully costed and approved by the Department of Finance and the ERSI. We have to go looking to slim down our government departments. We're looking to abolish the Shannon and reduce the size of the Dáil. Politics has evolved in a stage that there's a bubble in Leinster House that our politicians are part of. And I think it's critical that we need fresh
But that's
young
all a very
people.
small amount of the overall adjustment with respect. The political aspect accounts for, in the grand scheme of things, barely a percentage point.
Yes, but we need leadership from the top. People need leadership of the top to follow. If you have top leadership in terms of your politicians, people on the ground can say, well, look at, why is the pain that... why are we shouldering the burden that has been inflicted by our banks, by people?
Sure, but it won't account 72% of the adjustment. So what's the bulk of it?
It will make it easier for people to follow. Everyone has to sacrifice in times of economic contraction. We all accept that, but we can't be making any lavish promises here. What we're saying is we're the party that's able to put jobs into our economy by investing in broadband, get infrastructure into our economy. The only way we can get out of this is get people working, and we need jobs to dig our way out of a recession.
John Whelan, you're very frustrated in that you're shaking your head.
Sorry,
You've accused him of axing 30,000 civil servants. Well, what alternative do you present?
Well, that's Leo Varadkar's plan. He's made it clear that they want to get rid of 30,000 public sector workers, and we're saying that that's the equivalent of 2 teachers in every classroom, plus 1 out of every 6 nurses.
Yeah, but your party still wants to axe nearly half that number.
No. 15 to 18,000 is a far more manageable, far more feasible, and over a longer period of time. You have to be sensible. We must reform the public sector. My colleague here is right. You must reform it from the top down and lead by example in the Shannon and the government and so on. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of middle management tiers. But you can't slash 30,000 jobs and think that you're going to have good frontline services.
Well, where do you get the money to pay those wages?
Because there's people out there crying out when they go into hospital there aren't enough nurses. There aren't teachers to take in the new kids into school. There's special needs assistants are being slashed. When you talk about cutting public sector jobs,
where do you get the money to pay the wages for these services?
No, the core argument is a fundamental difference in emphasis, because I want to make the point here. Fianna Fáil have made the point about growing tourism. It's important to understand where we are. Last year was the worst year for tourism in Ireland in 15 years.
You're completely avoiding the question of where do you get the money to pay. There's a difference of 13 to 15,000 between the numbers of public servants you want to reduce versus Fine Gael. Where do you get the money to pay for those wages?
I'm going to tell you, the situation is that the root of all evil is the bank bailout, which was signed up to and voted for by every single party in the Dáil except Labour.
Okay.
So we're saying, well, the key to our strategy is that has to be renegotiated. Everyone now is accepting that needs to be the case.
It doesn't address the structural deficit, which is what we're dealing with at the moment.
It does, because all our money at the minute, all our taxation, and the central bank said this week that the economy is stagnating again. It's flatlining. You can't cut your way out of this recession. You have to grow your way out of it. And the reality is, another key Fine Gael policy, as just been enunciated here again this morning, is to sell off state companies like the ESB, Quilta, Bord na Móna and Post. That won't create jobs. It will lose jobs because they'll be bought by foreign companies.
Why would that lose jobs?
I'll tell you why. Because we're talking out of both sides of our mouth here in Fine Gael, because we're talking about developing broadband. We would have broadband if Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael hadn't have sold off Aircom.
You still, for the record, haven't answered the question as to where you'll get the money to pay the wages.
No, I have told you. The reality is that we have to renegotiate the deal. The taxpayer cannot continue to pay for the bailout, and the money we will save.
Nothing to do with the structural deficit that the state is running year in and year out.
There is an 18 billion shortfall in current expenditure, as you correctly point out, and we're saying that you deal with that deficit over a longer period of time, because the cuts that have been front-loaded by the Fianna Fáil government are stagnating the economy and closing shops across 10 shops closed in Portlaoise since Christmas, and that's been been replicated right across Edenderry and Tullamore. If you cut any more, they'll close every shop in the country down.
And a little later we'll get on to jobs and job creation through facilitating business and so on. Brian Stanley, you were quite anxious to get in there.
Yes, I've just come in that the Labour Party, I see they've just changed their position again in relation to the number of public sector jobs. John now tells us this morning that they've reduced it to 15,000.
I said 15 to 18.
15 to 18, which is a change in your position.
No, that's a constant.
The same as
And
I didn't interrupt you, John.
Sorry, okay.
But if we take it that the position on rectifying the gap in the public finances was over 4 years. That's what they said going back, that it would close the gap of 18.7 billion over 4 years when you go back 2 months ago. Then they moved to 5 years, now they've moved to 6 years. But we welcome that, John.